What is up guys, Andy Forestine Runner here, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Asics NOVABLAST, the Hoka One Carbon X and the New Balance Fuelcell TC and comparing them on how they perform on the long run. So as you guys know, I'm a bit of a long run warrior. I do love my long runs, and over the past 3 weeks we've been doing some cracking long runs in each of these shoes. We've put 18 miles in the Asics NOVABLAST. Last weekend we did 20 miles in the New Balance Fuelcell TC, and this weekend just gone we put 19.5 miles in the Hoka One Carbon X. And today what I want to do is break these shoes down into 3 separate categories and talk about how they perform in each of them. Comfort, performance and enjoyability. Those are the 3 areas that I want to cover today with these 3 shoes. So if you're excited for the video guys, make sure you give it a like, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel for weekly running content, and without further ado, we'll start with performance. So just before we jump into performance, let me explain why I'm breaking it down into these 3 categories. Basically, I've got 3 awesome running shoes here in my rotation. I've obviously got other running shoes in my rotation, but these are the 3 that I'm really enjoying for my long runs. And we have 3 effectively different types of trainers, which is why I want to break it into these 3 categories, because each of these things has their own forte. We've got, of course, a daily trainer in the form of the Asics NOVABLAST, which loves to have the pace picked up in it. We've got a racing shoe in the form of the Carbon X, and we've got this pimped up, souped up training long distance trainer style thing, forced to be reckoned with in the form of the New Balance Fuelcell TC. So effectively what we'll do when we go through these categories, I'll tell you which one excelled in each category, because to be honest with you, each of them has their own strong points. We'll start with the NOVABLAST in the performance area. This was the first long run we did 3 weeks ago. 18 miles, 6:40 something minutes per mile. The goal with all of these long runs, just so we're clear and up front, is just to run at steady pace. Okay, so at the moment I'm base building. I'm aiming to do 1 hill workout a week and take my long runs steady. That can range anywhere from low 7-minute mile pace down to 6 30-minute mile pace. All of these have been done on the Forest Dean cycle track to keep the test as fair as possible. So yes, this has been planned for a few weeks. And for me, I just wanted to share my thoughts and my findings with you on each of these shoes. One of the shoes has a bit of a disadvantage. We'll talk about that in a second. So 6:40 something minute miling, I think it was. 18 miles, felt absolutely great. In terms of performance for a non-carbon plated shoe, it gave me back everything I wanted to when we were running in it. And as far as performance goes, I think for me this was the second best shoe in the test from a performance aspect. Considering this is the only one that doesn't have a carbon fibre plate, I found it gave me more pop and more responsiveness than the other shoe, which we're about to talk about very shortly. So I was very, very happy with this. We'll come on to the other categories. I'm trying to be very specific with performance at the moment. So when I got back and I had run 18 miles in the Asics NOVABLAST, and I run it at the pace I run it at, I was very, very impressed. I was really happy with that, and that was a good benchmark to set in that thing. And then we'll move on to the Hoka One Carbon X, which is the one we did this weekend. This one sadly had the disadvantage, what I was just alluding to. The weather was absolutely horrific. I had monsoon weather this weekend when I got up at 6 o'clock. Was out the door at 6:40. The other 2 had beautiful sunshine. This thing had wind and rain, and it was absolutely horrific. So I'm trying not to read too much into it, because of course we've raced in this shoe a lot. So I know performance-wise this thing is the bee's knees, but in terms of how it performed on the long run, sadly it didn't do as well as I'd hoped. Sorry, that's the clock. It didn't do as well as I had hoped, to be perfectly honest with you. I kind of thought to myself, despite the monsoon, it was one of those mornings where I just wasn't really feeling it, but I went out there and I just couldn't pick up the pace in this shoe. Yes, the rain was making it difficult. Yes, the wind was making it difficult. But the shoe just felt like at that moment in time it wasn't helping. And I think, if I'm perfectly honest with you, that was just because I was on the softer trails. When you hit this thing on the concrete, it really moves. It really moves. So I think I put it at a bit of a disadvantage in terms of it wasn't in its natural habitat. Having said that, neither of the other 2 shoes are in their natural habitat on that cycle trail. But for this thing, after running in the TC the week before, it was very, very noticeable that the carbon plate in here, and I rave about this shoe because I absolutely love it, but when you run in the TC, then you run in this thing, you really do notice how subtle the carbon plate is in this shoe. So sadly, I wasn't too impressed with this thing. And we move on to the star winner of the performance area, which is the TC. 6:30 or 6:31 minutes per mile. Ended up doing the Forest Dean cycle loop twice. It's a 9-mile loop, so we did a 20-mile run in it because it was 1 mile out to the track and back, and I felt so good in it. I was only meant to do 18 miles. I just felt so good in it. Ran 1 hour and 7 minutes in the first loop. I kicked on and ran 1 hour and 3 minutes in the second loop to make it a steady / tempo run, because actually it felt so good. I thought to myself, well, I'm on a bit of a time limit. Can I make it round in this thing again? I feel like absolute gold. And this is where this shoe excels, basically, is those long run efforts. So it did, and I got round quicker, and the pace was hot, and the carbon plate was beautiful, and I felt fantastic. So from a performance aspect, this thing has got to take the win. On to comfort. We'll start with the Hoka One Carbon X. Now this shoe isn't known for its comfort. This shoe, for me, is a racing shoe. I've said it so many times on this channel. I like a racing shoe that is rather firm. I like to feel like my foot is almost slapping on the floor and moving. I just feel that if I'm running in a soft marshmallowy shoe like something like the NOVABLAST, that's great in training. It protects my legs. I feel like I'm almost recovering whilst running with such soft marshmallowy underfoot midsole. But in a race, you want to go fast. I don't want to feel mentally like I'm losing any speed by having a softer midsole. I do prefer the firmer midsole, and that's why this has been an absolute gem when it comes to racing. So ultimately, comfort is not its strong point. Out of the 3 shoes, it was the least comfortable. It certainly didn't bother me. It's not a problem with this shoe because I don't expect it to be comfortable. I expect it to perform well, and as I said, sadly, it didn't have the best of tests with the weather that we had. I know it does well because we've raced in it, we've done well, but sadly on this occasion, in these set of tests, it just didn't live up to what I was hoping it to do. It's going to be really interesting with all these racing shoes coming out this summer. I'm going to be grabbing a couple of pairs, and we're going to see how this thing performs against those shoes. So we'll be doing a comparison when we get to that. Then we move on to the NOVABLAST. We'll go to the NOVABLAST. This was my second favourite again for comfort. You know how much I love this shoe. It's just the best shoe in the world. Shoe of 2020 right now. Something has got to be pretty spectacular to take the crown from this shoe. And for me personally, the comfort in this thing is phenomenal. It just, the cushioning underfoot is beautiful. I think the only thing that really lets it down towards the end of a long run is that lack of, I don't know, when I found I got to like 15-16 miles, I did find that I was sinking into the shoe a little bit. Just like I did on the 1080 version 10 in the first couple of runs. I felt like at the end of the run, my feet were sinking in to the marshmallowy goodness that is the Flight Foam Blast. And that's not a problem. Like, I'm not really saying that it's an issue. It's just when I got to 14-15 miles, it felt like I had to work a little bit harder to keep up the pace because my feet just wanted to absorb into the goodness that is this shoe. So it just made things a tiny bit difficult towards the end of the run. On the whole, I'd still give it a 9.5 out of 10 in terms of how it performed and the comfort, but it was just that one tiny thing at the end. I did notice that I was just having to put that effort in that last few miles. And that leads me on again to the New Balance Fuelcell TC, where it was a 10 out of 10 performance on the long run in terms of comfort. Again, you guys know how I feel about the Fuelcell midsole. It is such a soft and squidgy midsole, and with that plate in there, it is the perfect combination. I said it before, I say it again. The Propel was slightly sloppy when you tried to pick up the pace. A beautiful shoe, but slightly sloppy when you tried to pick up the pace. With the carbon plate in here, it just feels so much more sturdy, and it just feels like the winning combination. And for all the faults that I have with this shoe, which you have seen in my After 100 Miles review video of this, the previous video, go check that out if you haven't watched it, because there are a couple of faults that I find. Comfort and performance is not one of them. This thing has got to take the crown again. And finally, enjoyability, if that's even a word, enjoyability. Which shoe did I enjoy the most out there? We'll start with the TC this time. This probably was my second favourite in terms of enjoyability. Obviously, performance and comfort, it topped the charts. It's a great shoe, but you have to remember that in the back of my mind, I do have those niggles with the shoe, as I've just said. I talked about those in the previous video when I got to 100 miles in them. There are a couple of things in this shoe. So I always have that thought in the back of my head when I'm running in this shoe. Are the laces digging in? Is the tongue slipping? How is my foot feeling in the shoe? Am I getting the hot spots? There's just a couple of minor things. I'll say it once, I said it again. I know I use that phrase a lot, but it's kind of like almost the perfect shoe. It's like they just pulled it off the conveyor belt just a second too early. They just needed to put those finishing touches onto the shoe to make it perfect. I know a lot of you guys don't get the issues that I get, but some of you do, and it's great to hear that I'm not on my own. So from that perspective, I just have to dock it a couple of points. It's, you know, it's nothing major, but from an enjoyability perspective, comfort, performance, 10 out of 10, but from the enjoyment factor, it just lacks it because I've got that niggling doubt in my mind that something's going to crop up with the shoe whilst I'm running. And then the Carbon X, we'll move to that one. Again, I enjoyed running in this thing on the weekend. I always enjoy running in the Carbon X. I know a lot of people don't particularly enjoy it. It splits hairs, this thing. People love it or hate it. It's a bit like Marmite. I love it. It's one of my favourite racing shoes that I've raced in. It's absolutely brilliant. And again, enjoyability factor is great. Comfort, sadly, and performance wasn't the best on the weekend, but from an enjoyability perspective, when I put the shoe on, I get a bit of a buzz, I get a bit of a racing buzz, do you know what I mean? I feel good when I wear this shoe, and that's such an important factor. So yeah, again, didn't take the crown on that one, and you know what's going to take the crown from the enjoyability perspective. 10 out of 10 for the enjoyability factor. Not only does this thing perform, and the comfort levels are through the roof, despite that little minor issue towards the end of the run, but the enjoyability factor on this thing is phenomenal. I grin from ear to ear the second I put the shoe on, no matter what the run. And when the thought of going out and running 18 miles or however long I was going to run in this shoe was just, it was incredible. I absolutely love it. And this shoe never disappoints when it comes to any type of run. And as I said, it just didn't disappoint with the long run. So from that perspective, I've got to give this thing top marks for enjoyability. So there we go. Those are my thoughts on my 3 racing shoes, or 3 long run racing shoes, I should say. Sadly, the Carbon X did not come out on top on this occasion. As I said, I do love this shoe. Massive kudos for Hoka for producing this thing, but sadly in this test it didn't quite fit the bill, and we'll blame the weather on this occasion. But these 2 shoes are the 2 that I'm going to be rotating on long runs. Probably going to be using this thing more. It's a real confidence booster. It's just such a great shoe, but of course this thing will be used on the majority of the other runs. Just a quick final note, if you have made it to the end of the video, I did have a shoe to review for you this week. Sadly, I had to send it back because it was too small, so stay tuned next week for a brand new shoe to be reviewed on the channel. Super excited about that one. But yes, these 2 have got to take the win when it comes to the long run. If you tot it up properly, this thing's the winner. But I love this thing too much to let this come second place. So they're going to be joint first place for these 2. But as I said, let me know in the comments below, have you run in either of these 3 shoes over the long run distance? What do you like and dislike about them, specifically when you take them out on the long run? Let me know in the comments below. So that's it for today, guys. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you give it a like, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel for weekly running content. And as always, I'll see you in the next one. Until then.